Our Deputy Director of Planning, Zachary Lamel, Chief of Long Range Planning, and Nora Masler, Planning Associate. Well, thank you all for being here. And of course, everything happens here because of Ms. Norton and her able skill with technology. So with that, I would just ask the Planning Board to, if you want to, Mr. McCormick, introduce your colleagues who are here and also online. And then I'll introduce members of the City Council who are here and online.
Thank you, Chairman Baker. We have myself as chair, Lee Breckenridge is here. Peter Doringer, I don't see, is supposed to show up, and it looks like Ed is there in the chambers. Is that right?
Mr. Daly's here. Yeah.
Affirmative.
They do, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are joined in the chamber tonight by the Vice Chair, John Oliver, Councilor from Ward 1. Not a member of the committee, but welcome Councilor Stephen Farrell from Ward 8. Councilor Block, not a member of the committee, but welcome from Councilor from Ward 4. Rena Getz, a member of the committee. And online, we're joined by Councilor Susan Albright from Ward 2 and Councilor Joshua Princeman from Ward 4. Have I got any other councilors that I have not recognized? I think that's it.
Right.
Thank you.
David Kalis.
David, yes, Councilor Kalis, Vice President, and Councilor Wright from Ward 3, and also seeing Councilor Kelly. Thank you from Ward 3. The images are smaller than I'm used to, so I have to make sure I catch you. Anybody else I've missed? Okay. The first item on our agenda is item 2424 parens 2, which is a requesting discussion and possible ordinance amendments relative to aiding small businesses impacted by development. And let me just read the whole item. Zoning and Planning Committee requesting amendments to Chapter 30 zoning to delete fast food establishment as used in Section 6.4.14. Requiring a special permit for any restaurant use with a drive-through restaurant and a new definition of business incubator and standards for such use, and define place of amusement contained in 6.4.27 and allow such use either by right, subject to limited standards, or upon the granting of a special permit. We usually have a short presentation at the beginning about the item for clarification of all assembled, and then go to the public for comment. So who's going to do this? Okay, please go ahead. Can you be heard clearly? All right. Just say your name again for the record for the public, right?
Great. Well, thank you all for your time this evening. My name is Nora Masler. And again, I'm the new planning associate on the long range planning team here in Newton. Today I'm presenting on zoning amendments to support small businesses. As you are all likely aware, the city approved changes related to home businesses in April. This docket item is a continuation of that process to support local businesses through amending Newton's zoning ordinance, providing amenities and services for Newton's residents while creating more employment opportunities throughout the city. The next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one more. The specific changes I will be discussing are explicitly.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. The slides are not coming through online. I don't know if. Yeah, I'm not seeing them either.
Thank you. We'll try and remedy that.
I'll lower my hand. That's what I was going to say too.
Thank you, the Chair of Land Use. Thank you very much. So you want to restart just to put everything back to?
We're seeing it now online.
I think this is the substantive portion. So the specific changes are explicitly allowing shared maker spaces and co-working spaces by defining business incubator, allowing for desired small to medium scale places of amusement by adding this definition to the zoning ordinance, and removing the term and definition for fast food establishment and incorporating this use into restaurant in alignment with current practices while requiring a special permit for drive-throughs. Next slide. So to speak to each in slightly more detail, starting with defining business incubator. Currently, business incubators are not defined in the zoning ordinance. So the proposed change is to define business incubator to allow for co-working and creative maker spaces in Newton. A strictly co-working space like the very successful Writer's Block in Nonantum can be categorized as office and is therefore allowed. This change is intended to make this allowance explicit, as well as allow for more unique collaborative business models by defining culinary and creative incubators, as well as co-working spaces within the business incubator use. I know counselors requested additional information about how the language proposed creates a distinction between culinary incubators and ghost kitchens in which restaurants operate for delivery only, which can exacerbate curb congestion. The proposed language differentiates a culinary incubator from a ghost kitchen by stating that this use is for businesses and organizations that provide business planning, access to finance, mentoring, and other business administrative support. However, to ensure that this was further clarified to eliminate any potential future ambiguity of interpretation, the planning department added language that would prohibit business uses solely providing kitchen facilities for the delivery of goods directly to consumers. Another change between the previous SAP presentation on this docket item and today's draft language is the removal of the proposed design and fabrication use. This unique use has the potential for larger equipment and therefore requires different regulations from the other uses proposed in the business incubator definition, and was therefore removed to be considered at a later date during evaluation of Newton's manufacturing zoning. Next slide. I know counselors also requested additional evaluation of the business incubator parking requirement of 1 space per 1,000 square feet. And following research, the planning department found this regulation was either comparable or higher than parking requirements in similar municipalities for similar uses. At the same time, over requiring parking can serve as a barrier to entry for new desired businesses. And we see the concept of shared workspaces, particularly with the prevalence of hybrid work, as unique from a parking perspective, given that most workers typically are not all in the space at once. Next slide. Moving on to the proposed change to allow the use place of amusement. Currently, places of amusement is not defined and is not permitted by right in any zoning district. However, places of amusement are the types of uses that enliven village centers, providing local entertainment for residents and create jobs in commercial areas. The proposed change is to define place of amusement to allow for desired businesses with businesses over 12,500 square feet requiring a special permit. Next slide. Sorry, one more slide. I understand that at the last SAP meeting, there were questions about the size threshold for requiring a special permit. Since that meeting, the planning department collected data on the square footage of existing establishments in and around Newton that would fit under this use, finding that 12,500 square feet appeared appropriate to allow for smaller places of amusement like small-scale theaters, golf simulators, bowling alleys, and escape rooms, while requiring much larger places like Superlux cinemas and driving ranges to apply for a special permit. Thank you. The parking regulation for places of amusement is 1 space per 600 square feet. Allowing this use is also a step towards increasing the diversity of uses in Newton's commercial areas, with greater diversity of uses creating a natural rhythm of continuous activity, reducing the parking load at any one time. Ultimately, this proposal is looking to remove barriers like arduous parking requirements to draw uses that community is looking to see. Thank you. Last in the proposal is removing fast food establishment use. The fast food definition was likely added in the 1970s as fast food establishments with drive-throughs gained popularity. And as it is currently defined, many businesses serving food can be categorized as both fast food establishments and restaurants. Slide. This includes businesses like Starbucks, Chipotle, and local pizza shops. Therefore, these establishments are often categorized as restaurants, leaving fast food establishment use fairly redundant. Fast food restaurants require a special permit regardless of whether it has a drive-through, and therefore this change would alter the zoning ordinance to only require a special permit if a business has a drive-through, while removing fast food as a definition. With that, we look forward to hearing the Zoning and Planning Committee and Planning Board's discussion and possible vote this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to open the public hearing. I want to make sure that I've got all members of the planning board recognized. If there are any, is Mr. Doringer here now? And also any other members of the council? Okay, so let me open the public hearing. And is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this item? Ms. Norton, is anyone online? Yeah. Yes, the planning board, do you want to go open your public hearing, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, would like to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Norton. We got to make sure we do all the right dance steps here. Okay. Anyone wish to be heard on this item? Anyone online? I will just note for the record, we received, I think, one letter from someone who operates a golf simulator and also a letter from the Chamber of Commerce in support of this item, correct? Anyone in the room? Anyone online? Yes. Do you mind coming to the mic, Mr. Sis? I recognize Mr. Sisson, and just identify yourself for the record again.
The mic's not turned on.
Okay.
Okay, you want to just start again if you don't mind?
Do so. Thank you, Jacqueline. John Sisson, Director of Economic Development for the City of Newton. I staff the Economic Development Commission. I just wanted to bring up that the EDC did also submit a letter of support for these, what we consider very business-friendly amendments to the zoning ordinance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sisson. So I think that, is anyone from the public wish to be heard? I'll recognize members of the council in a moment after we're did members of the council have questions before I close the public hearing? I recognize Councilor Kalis, I think.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, I appreciate the presentation. The one question I have is the 1 to 600 parking requirement on amusement spaces versus 1 to 1,000 on the previous spaces. Is the 1 to 600 also a standard that's used in other cities or towns? It just seems like that could be a lot if it's a 3,000 square foot establishment. I'm just wondering about that.
We'll just try and get answers to the questions and then have a discussion about this when we get into it after the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have an answer for that? If you do, you can give it. Otherwise, we'll hold it for a minute and come back to it.
Yes, thank you for your patience. After looking into similar uses in Brookline and Somerville, we found that Brookline has a very similar use with no parking minimum and a maximum of 1 space per 600 square feet. While Somerville had a pretty similar requirement to what we're proposing. So this seemed fairly conservative in terms of requiring sufficient parking for the use.
Okay. Other questions just before we close the public hearing? Counselor Albright, I think your hand is up.
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment was the same ilk as Counselor Kalis's. When you say Brookline has no parking minimums, how can you possibly think that this is conservative? I mean, it's certainly less conservative to that. And if we want to have success with any of these changes, it feels to me like you've made too high of a standard for the parking requirement. I don't, that as in Councilor Kalis's example, that would mean for a 3,000 square foot establishment, you have to have 5 spaces, which I don't know where that's going to go in our city. So, and then you end up having to go for a special permit to get a parking waiver, which is like defeating the whole point. So I feel like we've got a standard that doesn't make any sense here for parking.
So let me just ask if we could just reserve the discussion until we finish the public hearing and then come back, but that's comments fine. Any other questions? I just want to try and get questions out. If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Vice Chair moves closing the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? The ayes have it. The public hearing is closed. Mr. McCormick?
Yes, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so,
May I, one moment, please, may I point out to Mr. McCormick that I think Peter Doringer may be there, but he's not signed up in his usual fashion or admitted as a participant of the planning board.
That Peter's phone bar?
It says, hi, no, Peter's iPhone, something or other. There's an image pointed at his ceiling, which may be Peter Doringer. There he is.
Ah.
much better to see you than the ceiling, so. Okay, so you close your public hearing. Now, just to bring the item into committee, there have been a question raised by Councilor Albright about the parking requirement for the places of amusement. Any other comments about these items? And then we'll talk about it in committee. Any questions? Councilor Krinsman. May I recognize?
Just to discuss it in committee, if you want to get all the questions, go ahead.
We've done the questions. Now I'm just trying to discuss the item. I'd like to spend a little time on the item to see whether we can act on it tonight.
All right, so I'm happy to kick off the discussion then.
Yes.
Okay, so I appreciate the presentation. I think the use proposals make sense. My comment is also about the parking requirements. Once again, I fail to see the logic of a zoning requiring parking if we are looking to minimize traffic and if we're looking to make it easier for businesses to open without placing undue burden on them. I fail to see the logic of requiring any parking for any business use. So I'm happy to make a motion or take a straw vote in committee about removing the parking requirement, because that would be my preference.
Okay, let me just see if other members of the committee have any view on this subject. We have any members not on the committee? Have any hands up? Let me just say for myself, I'm in favor of a parking requirement. Remember that we're talking about potentially uses that gather people to them, and certainly something like the West Newton Theater would fit into the as a right category. And I think having some parking is an important part of what enables these facilities to fit into the context. So I'm in favor of the planning department proposal as made, but that's ultimately a judgment for the committee and the council. Let's see, others members, Councilor Oliver, and then I'll go to Councilor Blanc.
Great, thank you, Chair. I also kind of understand the concern about parking, the minimums, minimum requirements, that is. But I'm also curious, did we look at any other communities than Brookline? Or, did we look to their kind of guidelines, for any other communities?
I think Somerville you mentioned, right? Do you want to respond?
The other community was Somerville, correct?
Ms. Massler said Somerville.
All right, my
And-
fault. So between Somerville, Brookline, and Newton, there is at least one significant difference between those communities, and that is the proliferation of public transit in both Somerville and Brookline, and the comparative lack thereof here in Newton. It's not to say that that's a substantive reason to force these two particular uses to have parking minimums, but I would think that in order to get a better gauge, we should not only be including a Brookline and a Somerville, but some further outlying subs, if you will, to the Boston area, perhaps more of a Needham, Watertown even for points of comparison. But to that point, I also will acknowledge that for the most part, we have been trending towards no minimum requirements. But those are my only comments at this point. Thank you, Chair.
So we have Councilor Albright. You wish to be heard again on this?
Yes, this came up just now because of what something Councilor Oliver just said, but we are well served by the Green Line and moderately served by the north side with the Worcester line, but we're well served by the Green Line. So I would beg to differ a bit on the fact that we don't have any public transportation. I think we do pretty well in that arena. But perhaps you mentioned the West Newton Cinema. How many parking spaces would be required for that project? Could they answer that question for me?
The planning department is doing the math.
Because the West Newton Cinema has existed in that place for a long time, and even though they have no designated parking spaces, but they've managed to exist.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. The requirement, if they were going in based off this zoning, would be 20 parking spaces.
Which tells me that this parking requirement doesn't, it's kind of foolhardy, because how could you possibly maintain the West Newton Cinema with only 20 spaces? There's 100 people that come there at one time, and they've managed to find parking in West Newton. So requiring 20 spaces, I don't know where they would do it. They can't, they'd have to come in, with a special permit, they'd have to count the vacant spaces in each of the public parking lots. They'd have to count the spaces on Washington Street. It would just be an exercise that it would end up being passed by the land use committee, no doubt, if there is a land use committee waiver provision. So I just feel like the parking minimums should not be required here. And I thought we were going in that direction with the VCOD, and I hope we should continue to go that way, not the other way.
Thank you. Councilor Getz, a member of the committee, has raised her hand. I want to hear from her, and then Councilor Wright, who's online. Sorry, the hybrid form, and then Councilor Block. I'm sorry. I have you.
I'm just curious. I want a little bit of clarification from.
Can you move the mic closer to?
Yeah, the planning department, because I'm looking up in terms of current requirements of the number of parking stalls in 5.1.4, and it lists amusements, and it's 1 per 600 square feet. So I just want that to be, if that's in fact consistent with current zoning.
I guess.
Is my interpretation correct?
I can
Mr. Rowe.
say there's two pieces there. That is related to outdoor spaces. And if you go down to theater or there's also places of amusement listed there where the requirement is significantly higher than 1 per 600 as well.
Okay.
My retort back would be that in fact, this is actually a leniency. It's actually offering a less of a requirement.
Okay. Councilor Wright, and then Councilor Block.
So this is to the planning department. The West Newton Cinema, I think, would be too big for this by right? Because I thought it was more by smaller size. So they would need a special permit anyways?
Not under this
Is that-
analysis. Because they're under 12,000 square feet, as I understand it.
Oh, they are under 12? Okay,
Correct,
Okay.
11,259 square feet.
okay. Thank you. Yeah, I do think that's too much, the 20. And the thing is, you know, if we require them to have parking, which, and then we, you know, do a special permit and we waive it. I mean, if they don't have enough parking, they'll go out of business. And that's my worry right now. I mean, they do have the funding and to renew it, but parking is pretty tight in West Newton. Thank you.
So Counselor Block?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to comment on this connection between parking and car use. I think that we haven't really looked very hard at the data. Some people seem to think that if we don't create parking, that there won't be traffic as a result, that people will have to take public transit or walk or bicycle. But the growth of rideshare has shown that that's not the only way people get around when there isn't sufficient parking. And ride shares are vehicular traffic, just like any other vehicle. And in fact, if lots of people use rideshare, there will be an increase in traffic because they've got to get rideshare for round trips. What I've read about this is that the traffic engineering profession is still collecting data on this. Ride shares are relatively new development in transportation, and we really shouldn't jump to conclusions about it. I'd like to say one thing about the West Newton Cinema. I think we all hope that it manages to continue, but its lack of parking has been a serious problem for that business and will continue to be so. If there are ways of increasing municipal parking in West Newton and in other locations, that could be a big relief for businesses like Newton. And I think we ought to try and find a way to take into account an assessment of whether public parking is available in sufficient quantities in different parts of this city. Right now, I don't see any mechanism for taking that into account. It seems, for example, that Newton Center has a fair amount of municipal parking, and West Newton has a serious deficiency. So we ought to think about how we address that part of the equation. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So I'd like to see where we are in the committee. Let me just get a sense of the committee. For those members of the committee who are here, I think Councilor Oliver, Councilor Getz, the members of the committee who are present, Councilor Wright, Councilor Albright, and Councilor Kalis and Councilor Krinsman are online. Let me just send a straw vote in the committee if it's all right. As far as the provisions that have been proposed, if we take out and leave aside the question of parking, does anyone on the committee have any concern about passing the item in general?
No.
Member of the committee? Okay. So the concern, as I've heard it, relates to the parking requirement for not the there are two different requirements. There's the incubator requirement of 1,000 per parking space per 1,000 square feet. I haven't heard any concern about that. Councilor Getz?
Well, it's the numbering, and I don't know whether or not we need to clarify what the actual, I'm seeing the fast food establishment listed as 6.4.14 in the current zoning. So the numbering is off. I just don't want this to be voted out incorrect.
So, but clarify your question. I just want to give the planning department a chance to respond. Your concern is that there's,
How it's cited in the, is it correct? Or I'm just wanting confirmation that in fact in the current.
Ms. Kyra, can you respond?
Yes, That's correct. This 6.4 point, what we have is 1.5 fast food establishments should be 6.4.14. The other numbers are correct, though they will adjust after we remove fast food establishment. So it is currently 64.31 for restaurant. That will become 64.30. But we'll adjust all of those numbers because everything after fast food will need to be updated.
Okay. So I don't hear any concern about the requirement for the incubators and those. among
I
members.
have concern, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
I'm sorry. You do, Councilor Krinsman. You're concerned about both, right?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Sorry,
Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Sure. My concern is, generally speaking, as a matter of policy, I think that we have passed a number of different policies or taken a number of different steps to, in terms of our climate policy, in terms of our parking policy across the city, our efforts to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, our efforts to reduce reliance on the automobile, generally speaking. I think as a matter of policy, we should not be passing zoning that requires businesses to put parking in. I support businesses that want to allow for parking and want to feel that they need parking to support their business. I have no problem with that. But I think as a matter of policy, we should not be including mandatory minimum parking requirements for businesses. So I would remove both of these.
Okay. Let me just recognize Councilor Kalis, and then Mr. McCormick, your hand is raised and you have a question or comment. Councilor Kalis?
I just want to say that I agree with the unusually articulate Josh Krinsman.
I'm sorry, I usually articulate. I didn't hear the noun.
Josh Krinsman.
Ah, two nouns. Okay. Name. All right. Mr. McCormick.
Yeah, I just want to say the same thing. I just would strongly support what Councilor Krinsman is saying. I think we're trying to get small businesses here, and we need to help them as much as possible. And also, it's also a whole climate concern. So I do support having no parking restrictions.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let me just see you in the committee. Let's, if you don't mind, a straw vote, and then we'll see where we are on the item. I can't support the item without the parking requirements. I'll just say that myself. I think that's an important safeguard. We have the opportunity for waivers if we need it, but we're taking a big step by making a number of these as a right. So that's my own view. But let's just see in the committee, straw vote on the incubator. Those in favor of a parking requirement, so indicate. One. Anybody else? Two. And anybody else online? Councilor Wright, I don't see you, but I think you're there somewhere. Okay. Those opposed, this is straw vote. Just let me see. I have Councilor Kalis, Councilor Krinsman, Councilor Albright. Councilor Wright abstaining.
Yes, I'm abstaining.
Okay. So there's a majority sentiment in the committee to remove, excuse me, Councilor Oliver, I apologize. You're abstaining. So there are two abstentions. This is straw votes. It's not the item itself. All right. And then on the question of the 600 square feet for the as a right businesses, let me just see those who favor that again. Those in favor? One. Okay.
What is that?
I'm just clarifying. There are two different parking requirements. We talked first about the one for incubators, which is 1,000 square feet. Now I'm just asking the same question for the 600 square feet. 600. Okay. Those in favor of that requirement? Okay. The two. Those opposed? Councilor Krinsman, Councilor Kalis, Councilor Albright. Abstentions?
I am.
Councilor Wright and Councilor Oliver. So there's a majority sentiment in favor of removing both requirements. So to put this item cleanly before the council, is there a motion in committee to remove those items?
Yeah, Councilor Baker, I'm happy to move approval of the items without the parking requirements.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to do it.
That's the simplest way to do it. Okay. Any further discussion on that? From any member of the planning board wish to be heard on that? Okay, let's take a vote. All those in favor of the item with the parking requirements removed, will say aye. Just hold up your hand if you're online so we can make sure we register. I've got, say aye. Councilor Krinsman, Councilor Kalis, Councilor Albright. All those opposed? One. All those abstaining? Two, Counselor Oliver, Counselor Getz, Counselor Wright, and Counselor Wright is abstaining. So the item passes. Have we got that? There are 3 in favor, 1 opposed, and 3 abstentions. Counselor Oliver, I had as an abstention, I think, correct? Yeah. So I have 3 in favor, 1 opposed, and 3 abstentions. Am I got the math right? Who's missing on committee that? Ms. Norton, have I got it wrong?
The 2/3 vote. So
No, the 2/3 of the council, we can vote in committee.
even for the.
Yeah, the
Requires a
committee.
2/3?
That I don't think so.
Yes.
This is news to me. I don't think in committee you require 2/3. I think it's the full council.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's just the final vote that needs 2/3.
I think we'd be, otherwise we are, because it's the ultimate vote is the council vote. So I thank you for the council, but I think that's not accurate as far as we're concerned. So the item passes out of zoning and planning without either parking requirement, 3-1-3. Correct? Who we missing? We're missing 1 member of the committee. Counselor Danberg. Okay, that's right. Thank you. Okay, planning board, do you wish to take a vote?
Yes, I believe so. If everybody is ready, could we have a motion to approve this? Or do we have questions about this?
I move to approve as amended.
Thank you. I have all in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
That's 4. That's what all 4 have approved. 4-0. Thank you.
So
Thank
the
you,
planning
Chair
board
Baker.
vote, just to be clear, is coincident with the vote of the committee, correct? Mr. Daly?
Yes, yes, with the amendment to remove the park.
That's right. Okay. So I think that concludes our discussion on that. Am I correct, Ms. Norton? So, okay. So thank you, colleagues. Let's go on to the next item. This is an opportunity to have a discussion about NewGov. This is item 23224. This is Zoning and Planning Committee requesting a discussion with the Inspectional Services and Planning Departments regarding how the public and staff access NewGov. This is the city's website. This discussion will include a live demonstration of the system, and we're joined by Ms. Kyra, Deputy Director of Planning, Anthony Ciccarello, Commissioner of Inspectional Services, and Deb Finnemore, the Administrative Assistant for the department. And we're so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for coming out. And Ms. Kyra, are you carrying the one about large projects, your colleagues are fading into the sunset? Are you involved in the next item, but they are not? Okay, I just need to know who's on deck for the planning department. Sorry. All right. So this became about because we want to try and understand how this new system works from the public's point of view, as well as from the city's point of view. And I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues on the city staff to try and take us through this. But members of the council who are here, oh, Ms. Wright, you have your hand up. I'm sorry, Councilor Wright? Is that for?
No, I'm trying to get it down. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. So let me turn, Ms. Kyra, are you going to start us off? Or is Mr. Gallagher, who's going to be our lead batter here?
Sorry.
For those counselors at home, can you see this image on the city's, our system? I'm seeing welcome to NewGov system, but I want to make sure that.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Ms. Finnemore, you want to carry it on? Do you want to lead us off and tell us what's happening?
So we start today with the NewGov homepage. which the web portal is newtonma.viewpointcloud.com. And this is where everyone on the public can come, see records, apply for records, file complaints, search applications that have been issued. We have all the departments separated, and inside of each department are the record types that they have available right now to everyone. So for this presentation, we were going to start with just looking up a property address. You just come up here to the top. Over here on the right is a search bar. And now it brings you to the location or records. For this one, we're going to pick a city property. And as you can see, as you type it in, there's properties that populate underneath. You'll always see approximately up to 20 options to pick from. You'll never go past 20. Sometimes you may get absolutely nothing. That could be because an address is entered incorrectly, the spelling is incorrect, or there really is nothing for that place. We have tried to think of everything that we possibly can for showing what we can show. Some of these items we know are an issue for people, where you can see the record numbers, you can see the record type, you can see the status, but you cannot see a description. That is something that we, as the city, do not have control over. We have a bigger company that we deal with that puts this product out for us, and we have put in multiple requests to have additional features added. We're still in the process of debating these back and forth. It's not just the city of Newton that uses this product, so it does go up to debate with other municipalities in this state and in others. So we are constantly trying to push as much as we can to try to get it better for our community.
So just let me pause for a moment, just so we're clear. You can see for this property what has been applied for, but you can't actually see the actual application online, or you cannot?
No, you can see the application.
Oh.
You just can't see a brief description of what that application is for. So in particular, if you look at the building permit BP 23-1480, you have no idea what they're actually doing at that location until you click on it.
I see. You mean the heading doesn't tell you, but
Correct.
if you click on it, would you go to the building permit? Okay, I
Yes.
just want to understand what you can see and what, through the system, even if you can't see it on the homepage. Okay.
Once you click onto the record type, then you would have to go into it to see the actual description. There's the description.
But it is possible to understand what has been applied for if you go through a second level. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
It's just sometimes if you're looking for something right away, you'd like to know before you have to click on 25 different permits to find the one you're looking for. If there was a brief description that would just say remodel, install windows or doors, then it would be easier. And we do understand that. And it is challenging for us also on the side that we view. So we have brought this to the company's attention many times and are still trying to get that resolved.
So we maybe come back to this, but one of the things you may want to think about is what additional assistance you might require, if any, from the council. I don't know if there's anything we can do, obviously, but this is a software design problem, correct?
That's correct.
Cloud-based system.
Okay. All right, carry on. Any questions on this portion, just for members of the council who are attending and others watching? Any questions for members of council? If not, I'll let Ms. Fenimore.
I do have a question. I'm
Oh, thank you.
sorry.
You can't see.
Yeah, so how did they determine what 20 are listed? That's one thing I'd like to see, which it sounds like we can request it, but we don't necessarily will get it, is sometimes I put in just the street and I'd like to see all the ones on the street, especially if there's one next door, things like that. Otherwise, I got to pull up another map to figure what it is. Specifically, recently is, I think it's 16 Clinton, and I had to So sometimes I have to put in the exact address and other times I can just put in the street. How does it determine which ones are gonna get listed? And then you said it's only up to 20.
It goes with the closest match. There's nothing that we do that will decide which records are shown to you. It's all done based on criteria behind the scenes that we don't have control over. So we.
Okay, because 16 is below 20 when I would think that would be part of it, but it doesn't show. When you put in Clinton, 16 Clinton doesn't show up. You have to put in the exact address. Okay.
16 Clinton does show up when you type it in.
Oh, you did. When I did it about a week or two ago, it didn't, and I brought it up a bunch of times. I think that's the right address. It's the house with the retaining wall and stuff.
Oh, you might have been typing in address 20. If it's a
Maybe.
range of an address, you have to start with the lowest one, otherwise it will not give you a result.
Okay,
That might have been the issue there, and we're trying to get that also on the table with the company to give all the addresses in the range, not just the lowest or the highest.
okay. Yeah, that's probably it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Counselor Getz, a question.
Just in terms of like, when you pull up a property address, you are getting sequentially when you toggle on the files by date. Is it rank ordered by date? You know, just because I spend quite a bit of time, you know, going through all of the files in order to find the document that I'm looking for. So I'm just assuming that they are, the most current one is at the top of the list.
If
Okay.
it's active. If it's already completed, it'll be in the next section of if you see on the right-hand side under the status, all your active permits are gonna show together and all your
Okay.
completed ones are gonna show after that.
Okay.
Even if they fall in between dates, could be the same as something that's inactive, that's incompleted. It's still gonna separate them by the status.
Okay, and then in terms of uploading the content that you have in the paper files, you know, the jackets, has it been pretty much completed?
No.
Okay.
No,
So
we are currently in letter H. So we
So
still have
from
quite a few
H-
to go.
they're not in the files.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just a point of clarification, this is a map that shows, is there a link between the assessor's database and this and this system at all?
If you click on details, this matches what the assessors database has, but there's no other link directly to our assessors database.
So if you went and looked on the assessor's database, there's no hot link to this.
No,
Is there a way that could be done or should, I just don't know.
no, because they're different systems.
They can't talk to each other?
No, sorry.
Well, okay.
We have to do a quarterly download from the assessors database to get the updated information. And then it goes to the NewGov system, gets uploaded, and the next day we see it.
Okay, so I guess one of the long-term questions is how to make these things talk to each other, because obviously the purpose of NewGov was to get as much stuff as I thought we could get into one place, not in multiple places, but that's a conversation to be continued. Other questions about this portion of NewGov? Anybody? Councilor Oliver, thank you.
Great, thank you for this. I am wrestling with the phrasing of this. Once I'm in NewGov, right, we have a bright, shiny spot. I find this to be completely navigable. You can find what you're looking for. Sometimes you got to poke around a little bit, but it's there. That's awesome. My concern is actually getting to NewGov. And my questions have more to do with how are we helping people understand what's in NewGov versus what's not? And how does this connect to, or how is this kind of thought of by the broader search, tool or appliance that is the city website itself? Like, how do we connect or help to explain, for example, even if you go back one screen, I think you and I were just looking at the same page. Just go to records, I think.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Or just search for Clinton, whatever. Like, for example, once you see the results for 1622 Clinton, like, how does the public understand, or how can we help them understand what active means? You know what I mean? Like, the data's there, the info is there.
Correct.
Now, how do we make it kind of intuitive as to what people see and how do we help them get from point A to point B, which theoretically is what they're after? And that might be a question that we take offline and come back to, but because I understand it kind of crosses a lot of boundaries, but to me, that is the question that I bump into when residents call me and go, where is blank?
Right.
I know where to go and look, but there's nowhere I can send people so that they understand, like, here's where everything is within the city's website, because I don't think that currently exists. Even the search function kind of lacks a little bit to be desired.
I agree.
So
Totally agree.
anyway, like, I would love to see us kind of tackle how do we get from homepage of the city website into NewGov? And then maybe that's as far as we can go, but ideally, I don't know why 16 Clinton keeps coming up tonight, but just as an example, what if they wanted to go in and see the site plans and the different iterations? Like, how do we help someone get that?
So to answer that question, I went back to our Newton MA homepage, and right under search is new permitting system 11.1.
Yep.
That's from 2021, when we went live with our first applications, not all departments. And we had created this little storefront user guide. And now that I'm looking at it again, there are a lot of things now that we could add to this. And we could talk to our own internal IT department and possibly make this somehow larger on the homepage where it would be easier to be seen.
Right.
Quite possibly, I know I'm jumping back and forth, I apologize, but there's a possibility we could try to get one of these icons to have something to be NewGov help guide or search features, what you can
Something,
find.
right? Like,
Is
there's
that
got
where
to be
you're
a
going with your question?
kind of, but I mean, we're also making, and again, this, I might be going way into the weeds here. I don't think it's fair or to expect anyone in the city to understand new permitting system. Like,
Correct.
Yeah, that's fair.
how do we,
Absolutely.
again, I keep coming back to it's there. And once you're close, it's easy to, go that last, 6 feet. Getting to that point, however, is almost comically difficult. Right.
I do
And
understand. and
I
agree.
guess what I'm saying is, hey, let's go figure that out.
Okay. I think that is something that could be addressed with our internal IT department and making it so that there is a link to go directly to the NewGov system, but also to have some type of a document or an interactive form where they could see what you can find and be able to click directly to it from there. I know different departments, we have set up our own pages on this so that you go directly to the application from our site and not have to just go to the NewGov site and search it for yourself.
Yep.
But that's a good thing we could try to start with.
Right, because I mean, when you look at some of the other options that are right there, Rumford waste pickup. I know what,
Oh, sorry.
I know the expectation there. Paving schedule. Yes, that if I'm looking for that, that makes sense to me. New permitting system 11.1, there's some guesswork
Oh,
involved.
absolutely.
Anyway, you get my point.
Yes.
I'm gonna stay seated, but I'll be quiet now. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's important. I think what we're asking is that, in a sense, you could convene a focus group of just ordinary folks sometime and say, you need a roadmap of the web page, really, and how to use it. And that's, I think it's very much available to people like us who are insiders, but that's let me just recognize, I think Counselor Kelly, the Chair of Land Use, has raised her hand. I want to recognize her, and then Counselor Wright, and then come back to the committee.
Thank you. Following up in a way on the questions that Counselor Oliver was just asking, I'm so glad you just talked us through this, Ms. Fenimore, because I never knew what new permitting system 11-1 was, and I was at a loss when you couldn't go into the other system and look up special permits, you know, current or archived, or if the address wasn't a little bit right. Like I too was trying to look up 20 Clinton, and you can't do that. So my question here is, if someone like me, or just an average resident, were to put under search special permits, would it bring them to it when you were just on that page you just got off of, under where you just were under the City of Newton? See where it says search, if you were just to do special permits, would it bring you to this page you're talking about? And can you find the existing ones that we used to call archived and the current ones? And if the address isn't quite right, as you said, they need to figure that out and, you know, start at that earlier
lost
number.
You
Sorry?
lost your page.
I just lost my page.
Well, I kept talking, it's okay. I'm just wondering if,
You broke the system.
if
The
they
internet is
connect-
now broken.
if they can connect through a search function, so people who don't know what it is they're looking for can type in something, whether it's an address or a special permit. And again, I'm coming kind of from a land use and special permit perspective here. But it could apply to other things. So Ms. Fenimore, if you type in special permit right there.
So I don't think this will take you to NewGov.
Yeah, no, I tried that the last few weeks and it didn't. So I just thought I was doing something wrong. Okay.
So the best way to get there is going you can go through planning or ISD. We have links right from our pages. So if you go to government and then, so inspectional services has online permitting, planning has online applications, online permit history lookup, inspectional services.
So I'm asking in a way from a more naive point of view.
Sure.
We have people like this who, for instance, just came to land use last week, who don't know how to navigate this. What they think they want to know is, how do I find out about special permits?
It may be that the help people that you dial 79000 or 796-1000 when you call and say, I need some help. Maybe that one of their functions should be help to have you navigate the city's webpage. But
Yeah. Well, and I guess I'm suggesting too that perhaps that search function will be able to overlap. If people type in what it is they think they're looking for, perhaps the next iteration of this can help them find that.
I think the point is there's going to be benefit in having a guide, both oral and verbal, to the webpage and how to use it, right? And that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so I think these are all good points, and we can work with IT to try and see if there is any sort of overlap with the city search and try and make it more intuitive to get here from the city homepage. We can also work with the clerk's office as far as links from, their pages to, how to look up special permits. I know the special permits are linked from the agendas. The records are linked from the agendas. So that's another way for people to get there.
Okay.
But I agree, it can certainly be more user-friendly and intuitive. So that's something we can work on internally.
I do want to let our commissioner to do his demonstration. He has an enforcement item to show us. Colleagues, can you just let Ms. Fenimore, is your system down or is it?
Sorry.
Your system is down. All right.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in? Because I'm kind of following up with.
Councilor Wright, and then who else we got online? Mr. Doringer. Councilor Wright, go ahead, and then Mr. Doringer.
Okay, So I want to follow up on this and maybe we need a fact page that's right there. I get multiple requests a week and it's not just for special permit, you know, the house next door is huge and where are their drawings and how do you find out about it? So I'm one or two at least, sometimes more a week, I'm going in there and I'm finding the document and then I'm going and I'm showing them and writing it down. Well, this is how I got there because it's not very intuitive. And I know now because I've done it so many times, but I think it's important and not just special permits, but for anything, for any address, any permits that are there, because the permits are there. It's people just don't know how to get to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Doringer and then Counselor Getz again.
So I have created a work in progress.
Mr. Doringer, let me just get his question. Mr. Doringer? You have your hand raised. I didn't know. Are you there? He's muted though. Can you unmute him?
So maybe, am I unmuted now?
Now you are.
Okay, I don't have a question. Sorry about
Sorry,
that.
your hand was raised. That's why.
I'm still trying to deal with my computer problems, but
Okay.
still here, but silent, more or less.
All right.
I
Okay.
apologize.
Now we're back. You're back in the game now, I think.
Thank you.
Counselor Getz.
I truly appreciate the new Gov system. It's
Can you
incredible.
speak to the mic a little?
Yep. Yep. All right. So what I would suggest is if there's any way to link, I think that I actually send the link. I actually open the document and I actually send the link to whomever, just in terms of putting it right in front of them, because it's the easiest way to rather than navigating them to the site, I just send them the link. So the other question I have though is in terms of the uploading of information. Is there somebody internally that is pretty, like all the special permits? There's linking all of the systems so that then if you went to the assessor's database, that you had an opportunity there for online permit lookup. Just right on the property address, because I think that's probably intuitively the simplest way for somebody to access information is just looking up the property address and looking at the map. This would be an IT thing, I'm guessing, that they would actually be able to put on the assessor's database a link to the system, the permit lookup system.
I think problem we've understood, as I understood, that they can't talk to each other. That's the question I asked earlier.
It's also, we ran into, it's also difficult just to add any field to the assessor's database. Just not even linking the two systems, just adding anything to the fields there is difficult or not able to do. So ideally down the road, that would be great if everything's sort of in one place and you can see it all from one place. It's not something we can do right now.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to let the Commissioner to demonstrate one other aspect. You've got an enforcement. Can you do that with the assistance of Ms. Kyra? Okay. For those of you who are at home, we're having an interesting problem. One laptop failed and now we're on a second laptop in the chamber. So it shows you the problems of technology.
So go to new.
Yeah.
You're gonna, right here.
Where is it?
So if I wanted to do, say, a leaf blower enforcement, is that what you like? Yeah, okay. So I would go to,
So somebody wants to make a complaint, right? And you want to encourage them to use the system as opposed to call you on the phone. How do they do that?
yeah, I do. Yep. There are two different ways to do this. One through the NewGov system and one through the ISD webpage.
All right, so let's go, you're coming in from the public though, and remember, the public says, I want to complain. If you just type in, I want to complain, what does that, or something, is there a way to get them there? I think part of the conversation tonight is the value of having.
How to get them
one
in. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's go with where you go, just to show what you can do now, and then we can talk about what might be done.
So if we go right to this City of Newton webpage and we just do a search on leaf blower. Complaint. You can scroll down and under leaf blower information, you can click that. That brings you to the ISD webpage. And as you scroll down, you see leaf blower information is highlighted. You can click on that, or you can look at where it says in the white below 2021 annual list of leaf blower violators and complainers. You can scroll down, and the next one is leaf blower complaint file online. Please click here. So you click that. And it brings you right to where you can apply for the leaf blower complaint. You can read here. I know people sometimes are very concerned about making complaints and being not anonymous. But it says right here, please complete this form for any violating leaf blower ordinance. All information is kept confidential from the alleged violator. Okay?
Then what happens next? Okay?
Okay, and you can just click the apply online. Now, for me, I already have a username and a password. Yeah, but I just want to explain too.
Yeah.
If somebody who has never been on the website needs to create a username or password, they just need to click sign up, put in their email, and just create a simple password. And then they could log on and apply for that complaint.
Can
So,
you,
the
Gary,
log on is Jen Kyra.
she lives in a noisy neighborhood.
Yes, she does.
Counselor Block, just let him finish this and then we'll take a question.
And then you can either plug in the address that you're making the complaint at. If it's a neighbor, more or less you know the address, you can just type in that address.
I'm going to recognize Counselor Block and then Counselor Farrell in a second, but let him finish loading.
That's a good one. So I chose the 345 Walnut. Click that location. And it'll ask you what unit number. It's the senior center, obviously. You type in all the information that you need here. Then you would click next. And just follow the instructions all the way through. It'll ask for your name, but just be aware that your name is never published or made aware to the public. It's always kept confidential. And you would just continue to follow through. Here's where it would ask for your name. Reason for this is a lot of times this will give the leaf blower enforcement permission to traverse your property, pretty much is what it's for. And we do need to know the name of the complainant, just in case it ever went to court.
I'm sorry, you said that this gives the leaf blower inspector the opportunity to search the property?
Traverse their property.
But this is not the name of the person. They're not going to search the property owner who puts the name down.
Right.
Okay, I just need to clarify. Let me have Counselor Block and then Counselor Farrell. Counselor Block?
Just coming at this as a newcomer. I find this very confusing, and I think for the average person, it would be very hard to use. And it's really important that we make it easier, because otherwise they call me. They want to know what they should do. And a lot of times I'm at a loss to tell them what to do. So we've got to somehow think about this from the point of view of the user who has never heard of ISD. They're not thinking about addresses. They're thinking about problems. They have a pothole that's not filled. They have a tree that's leaning over their car. They have something very concrete like that. And they're probably, we could probably list what the most frequent kind of issues are that people are concerned about. And maybe we need some shortcuts for the most frequently raised issues, whatever they are. We'll figure that out so that at least we can make it easier for somebody to figure out, okay, they've got a pothole. Who do they want to tell? How many people do they want to tell? What should they expect? You know, it's almost like we need a little tutorial on the side here, like, okay, you have a problem. This is how you're going to proceed to tell us, the city, what your problem is. I think even just your clicking on apply online, I don't think that's what the average person, and they're not going to respond to that. They're not applying for anything. It's not like they're applying for a credit card or, you know, whatever. We're using that language to try and get them to input what identification information or whatever it is, but they're not applying for anything. So we need to kind of rethink the language that we use for this. And I think we can do that. I don't think this is, you know, extraordinarily difficult, but I think having an average person, none of us, I mean, we're all insiders. We kind of work through this. We have our shortcuts. We know what ISD is. We know what a building permit is. But the average person is going to be flailing around, I think, with something like this. That's just my kind of comment. Thank you.
Can I just clarify? I think Councilor Block, what you're referring to, most of that is 311. It's not this system. So this is really only for people applying for something. The sort of exception here is for someone seeking enforcement. So leaf blower enforcement is what we're showing right here. But those other complaints are all the 311 system.
So one of the questions, I'm going to recognize Counselor Farrell. I've got Counselor Getz and then Counselor Wright. So let me do that now. Come back in committee. Counselor Farrell?
Thank you, Chair. That last comment was really important to me. There is a difference here. And how do we tell people the difference? I mean, tell residents who aren't used to any of this that there's a difference. I've given this particular issue to two residents who stopped after a while and just said, "Yeah, I can't do this." And then the question of that is, how do I delete what I've already started? Is there a way to delete a complaint if they decide not to go through it? Because there's no way. Let me tell you, I put my own name and address in one just to try it, and now I don't know how to delete the record. So that's another thing. And I think complainant information.
Can you move the mic a little closer to you?
I'm sorry, Chair. If the complaint information, if you could say in big bold letters, confidential. Because a lot of people get here and go like, why do I have to do all this? And there is a reason. And I was told by ISD, the one complaint that I'm trying to work on right now, they had to get this complaint in order to have permission to go on the property to do something. To explain, that would be helpful to explain. We need this so that we can do this. Lastly, is there any way that I, as a city councilor, can go into the records and find out what's happened with that complaint that I got that person to do?
Confidential while there's an ongoing.
But I can't even go and see that complaint was logged? Okay,
You'd
so
have to call.
how do they know when it's done? Is there a response to the complainant that we've accomplished this task?
When it's accomplished, there are sometimes updates made by the zoning enforcement officer to the complainant.
To get back in touch with the
Yeah,
complainant?
yeah.
There's sometimes an
Yeah, depending upon what it is. And when the complaint is resolved in the system, it'll say complete.
Not to answer it to you right now, but I would really
right.
appreciate a description of the difference between 311 and this.
So
And which one I would give to residents to file a complaint.
without,
if-
without, I'm going to make a suggestion for colleagues here. I want to just get the questions, but this seems to me a conversation that's going to be more successful ultimately to assist you all and the administration to have maybe ask the president of those who are interested in working on this to have a little subcommittee of counselors who could converse and just go through these with you offline in a time that allows a chance to think through these dimensions. Because I think the concern that I'm hearing from counselors is that not just counselors, but the public is very much finds it difficult to navigate this system successfully. But let me go to those counselors who have been, I have Counselor Getz, then Counselor Albright and Counselor Wright.
I think there would be benefit in bringing in the IT department. Because we're conflating, what's happening here with the 311 and, the IT in terms of what the homepage offers you. So I think it's an IT discussion as Jen Cara had suggested. So I think there's benefit to having that conversation, but it's sort of expanded here. And I think that we need the homepage to be able to help people navigate to exactly where they want to be for the specificity of what their issue is.
Counselor Albright and then Counselor Wright.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that, those of us who were part of the council 5 years ago, maybe put it that way, know that this is leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 5 years ago. And not only that, but in the review of the software that was chosen, we've chosen I know that we've chosen the absolute best software that's most user-friendly, that's available to cities and towns. So I want to specifically thank Ms. Fenimore and who has shepherded this thing through the city and opening it up to new departments. I know the clerk's office is thrilled that when a new feature that they offer is added to the system. I know that the people who use the system, they get used to it and then they say, wow, this is great, because the interaction between me and the city has become so much simpler. So I just want, and it isn't a 311 system. It's basically an application to do various tasks by either professionals who work with the city or citizens who do things for the city or with the city. So I don't want it to get lost in this discussion of how far it's like we're drag kicking and screaming into the 21st century, having been almost in the 18th century 5 years ago. So I want to be sure that Ms. Fenimore is thanked profusely for all the time that she's done to put into this. And I know it's got warts and things could be made easier, but it really is a fabulous system. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. I think all of us would support that. Right? Councilor Wright? You're
Oh,
muted.
sorry. So, I use the 311 system all the time and, you know, a dead street tree, burnt out, street light, whatever, and it works really good. I thought, leaf blowers was part of that.
I don't think so.
No, it is not.
No? Oh, okay, okay, but for the other things, and this is going, you know, to Counselor Block, and that is the 311 system, I think is very good. And what you can do, and so there's a lot of things that you can do there. Potholes, you know, things like that. That's all part of that. Thanks.
So I want to thank the Commissioner and Ms. Finnemore, and I agree that you all spent a lot of time on Ms. Kyra. Any other questions? Members of the committee? Any of the members online? I'm going to entertain a motion hold on this item simply because I would like to have an opportunity to talk to the president about just the challenge of helping provide input to the department so that you can make this as accessible to the public as possible, if that's agreeable to you. Because I think we're all interested in the same thing. We want our citizens not to be frustrated. And to the extent that we can have them go directly to the city to deal with something rather than dealing with members of the council as their intermediaries, I think that's to the positive good. So entertain a motion to hold. The motion to hold.
Hold.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, the ayes have it. The item's held, but we do want to thank you. And I think that what I would hope is that after some time and conversation, there's an opportunity to come back and demonstrate how you've responded to these opportunities. And that would be great. But again, thank you. And again, for thanking when your own computer went out. That was that was almost too much to believe, but never mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. The last item is item 23124, requesting discussion regarding community engagement process for large projects. This is Zoning and Planning Committee and Councilor Kelly requesting a discussion with the Planning Department, Law Department, Chair of the Land Use Committee, and Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding the process for community engagement for large developments. And we're joined by this by Mr. Temple, who is the Deputy City Solicitor. I don't know if Mr. Heath is going to join us online. Is he going to be there? I don't know.
He is not.
He is not. Ms. Kyra, of course, is here. Mr. Rossi, who is Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, we'd like to welcome you to the committee. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Let me just say a word about the genesis of this. There was a very thoughtful memorandum that I think all the members of the council had an opportunity to review that basically pointed out that Mr. Rossi, your committee, for example, had multiple public hearings where your public hearings were held open on a recent project and went to great lengths to try and accommodate a lot of commentary and testimony. I think the thrust of the question here is one that's more generic and not just unique to yours, but involves land use and indeed any time we're dealing in the council with a large project where there is a developer of some scale or a development of some scale, and the public generally has opportunities for comment in increments of 3 minutes in the process of a public hearing. And the question that I think led to this conversation, or at least this item, is whether there's some possibility of an intermediate arrangement where there can be a conversation that involves a more structured, lengthy commentary by those who are concerned about a development with the planning department, maybe with the developer, whether it's in a public forum or in some other context. But that's I think the genesis of it. I think members of the council who are here may have some elaboration on the purpose of this, and I just want to make sure that we get this context right, and then we will turn it over to those of you who are doing this on a daily basis, or even not an automatically daily basis, but regular basis. Councilor Farrell, do you want to add anything to this?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is hopefully a great and positive conversation. I would like to start by saying clearly that I am very appreciative of the work that the different commissions do in order to help examine projects and make determinations on them. I have watched the ZBA, I've watched the Conservation Commission, and I've watched, I'm learning about land use as a member. Everyone is doing what I believe has been the process up to now, and I respect the work that each of those members do. What I would like and hope we can have a conversation about is how we can expand access on issues. There are many issues in these conversations that are subjective, and there will never be complete agreement. Is a building handsome? Is it ugly? Is it too big or is it too small? Whatever. But then there are some that are quite objective. And in some instances that I know of, large groups of people have come and said, we would just like to have a conversation where we can ask a question, someone will respond, and if we have a concern, we can refine the question or comment again. Let me add in here as a little parenthetical question. I don't expect any of these commissions or groups to open this up to 100 people or more. I think if there is a large organization that can demonstrate a large support and similarity of purpose, that if they say we have in these objective cases a professional who has a difference of opinion, and we would like that person to be able to work with maybe one or two members of the committee to come in and have this conversation. And I don't know where that happens. And I think that's part of our conversation tonight, is where that happens in the process. But I would like to see us really look at that, where groups can come in, and representative groups on significant issues that are, for the most instance, objective and not subjective, and can have real dialogue and conversations with either the planning department or the applicant of a project, or even the peer groups that are established to review this if there happens to be that situation.
Okay.
But it's complicated, and I understand it's complicated, but I think there are many residents who are frustrated at the moment by what appears to be a lack of access and engagement in the process. And it can't be answered by 3-minute statements. It really is, they're looking for conversation. I say this, some professional says, well, I have a different opinion, and they go up and have a conversation. So I don't know how that happens, Chair, but I have experienced it
And I
in many
suspect,
instances.
given what is happening tonight, we won't have a conclusion to this conversation even so. But never mind that. I do want to recognize Councilor Wright, who had her hand up, if she has a comment before we turn it over to Ms. Kyra in the Law Department.
No, I need to bring it down, sorry.
Okay, so I guess what I would like to do is to ask the question that Councilor Farrell has asked, which is there a mechanism that, if not available now, could be done lawfully that would enable a conversation to occur around issues on large projects that is not just the public hearing model, but that's the questions being asked, I think. We've started Ms. Kyra, Mr. Temple, Mr. Rossi. Anyone would like to respond? Mr. Temple? Let's just identify yourself again for the public in the record, if you don't mind.
Jonah Temple, Deputy City Solicitor. I certainly understand, counselors, what you're looking for.
If you could move the mic a little closer to you, just because.
I certainly understand the concerns and the desire to have it be a more open and interactive process. The problem is that for special permits and for comp permits, we're working under strict statutory process and guidelines. This is a quasi judicial process and we need to follow it to the T. And it doesn't allow for that level of interaction.
If I can add on, I completely understand how it's frustrating in the moment for residents. You get 3 minutes, you don't get an immediate response. You have an expert that has a difference of opinion. I do want to say though that all of those comments and the analysis submitted is evaluated and considered. So for example, the recent 40B project at 528 Boylston, there were neighbors who hired their own expert regarding stormwater and groundwater concerns. And that was thoroughly reviewed by our peer reviewers. There are some places where they differed in opinion or some things can happen through the conservation process, but there were additional analysis that was done as a result of that. So the applicant did go back and I think bring on a completely new consultant to do a groundwater analysis in response to that. So it's not that dialogue and that back and forth, and I get that frustration. As Attorney Temple said, we're kind of limited in the process, but all of those things are considered and often do impact the process and the analysis done.
Yes, it happens to me.
I just want to recognize we have
We should be
Counselor Albright
drinking hot
raised your
tea.
hand. I'm sorry, Counselor Albright, you're now being, apologies, your hand is in the corner of the screen in a particularly difficult way to see it. But fortunately, Ms. Norton is sharper eyed than I am. So you may have had it up for a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry that you heard me telling my son to drink some tea for his cough. Sorry about that. What I wanted to say was that, and Mr. Temple, you might be telling me that everything we've been doing is wrong. I hope that's not the case, but I've been involved as a counselor from the ward for at least 3 large controversial projects, the Boston Street project, the Trios project, and Shari Tefila. And actually, I would add a couple of other temples into that. And what we've always been able to do in Ward 2 in the past is find a mechanism to bring the constituents together with the applicant and give them a chance to talk over these projects and let the applicants hear what the constituents are saying and bring a better, and actually in Riverside, this happened quite a bit. And Mr. Block and Councilor Block could talk about this. So I hope, Mr. Temple, you won't tell me that that's illegal for the council's board to facilitate a conversation between the constituents that are affected and the applicant, so that when it comes to the land use committee, it can be a better project.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. In fact, what you just laid out is absolutely
A little closer.
a best practice, and it's encouraged and pretty close to required for all large projects, whether on the special permit side or on the comprehensive permit side. There's numerous committee meetings when it comes to these large projects, and that's fine, and that's productive. What I'm saying is it can't happen as part of the public hearing process before the adjudicatory body.
Right, but if through this process that the councilors from the ward can engage in, you give people a chance to have not 3 minutes, but 3 hours, and maybe not just 3 hours, but multiple. It really, it doesn't necessarily stop the controversy, but it provides an opportunity for people to really be heard.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think that's a great role for ward counselors, especially when it comes to comprehensive permits.
Yeah.
I would just say that my experience in Ward 7 is similar. We've had multiple conversations, but the framework of our policy and our land use is that we want these conversations to occur when the developer and the affected community are both in the room at the same time with the counselors, not by themselves.
Absolutely.
So I have Counselor Getz and then Counselor Block.
I'm just,
Excuse me, Counselor Oliver, sorry.
I
Yep.
see to Counselor Oliver if he is,
I'm sorry.
was prior. Okay, I just have a.
Just again, just make sure the mic is in front of you.
Okay, I have a question about, in the ZBA rules for 2024 in terms of the section 6, the order of business. Are these discretionary? There was one person that had sent to me that depending on the municipality, they can reorder this. It doesn't necessarily have it to happen in this order, and the time limits as well. So I didn't know if this was discretionary or whether or not this is something that, depending on the year, it could be reevaluated so that then the order of this process could be reconsidered as well as the time limits that were set in the rules. So I just didn't know if this was statutory or required in any way, or if there is flexibility, because there are other municipalities that have quite a different format.
Counselor, could you, we don't have the rules in front of me and I don't know them. But
It's in section 6 on page 20.
And
It's
what is it set forth?
Well, it just says the order of business. The
I think-
following, okay,
I think the order of business is ultimately at the discretion of the chair. There is flexibility that what's set forth there is pretty standard, I'm sure, for the ZBA.
okay, but that's contrary to what a specific person had sent to me, that it's pretty different in other,
I'm sure
abutting
every municipality and
municipalities.
every board
Right.
is different. I'm sure
Right.
every board doesn't do it exactly the same for every meeting. You're not held or required to any order of business.
Okay, and I understand this order, just in the sense of being able to, hear first from the applicant. But many meetings that I've attended, the applicant speaks for quite a length of time. And then there are questions, it just seems as if you're asking the public to sit for hours before they're allowed to testify. And I do think that if there could be a little bit of flexibility in terms of meetings so that, if in fact there's a series of meetings, that the order flips. So that then, the public speaks first. Just because I think that, it's pretty consistent that the public waits for 3 hours or longer in order to speak.
So, Mr. Rossi, you want to respond? Just
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the frustration there, and I certainly wouldn't want to have to wait 3 hours either. But I think we have to at least be cognizant of the burden that is on the developer to establish what it needs to establish to obtain its comprehensive permit. And that's really what that's their job. That's the initial purpose of the public hearing, is for the developer to lay out what its plans are, how those plans have changed, and why the permit should be issued. I also think it would be instructive for members of the public or members of the council who are interested to take a look at the Mass Housing Partnerships Chapter 40B handbook for zoning boards of appeal. And that handbook lays out a basic public hearing protocol for comprehensive permit projects. And we're not necessarily bound to follow it, but I would suggest that it's good practice. I've been on the ZBA here for, I think, 12 years. I think it's worked effectively for us in that time. And that public hearing protocol clearly sets out the order of operations that we adhere to. It first talks about how the developer will present on the project. Next, after that, the ZBA members will have time for questions. And then following that, the hearing is open to questions and comments from members of the public. The handbook also says that some ZBAs routinely set time limits on individual comments. So this isn't a protocol that is unique to this board or that we've adopted ad hoc. This is a statewide, I would suggest a statewide standard that we've adopted and implemented consistently over a number of years. I think it's worked. Is it perfect? By no means it is perfect. And again, I would hate to sit for 3 hours when I had something very important to say, but we're trying to take into account a lot of different interests. And I will say, I think to our board's credit, is that we've never, at least as long as I've been here, we've never put a time limit on a meeting. We've never said it's too late, we need to go home. We've stayed here until every single person who wished to speak had an opportunity to speak. So I think, again, it's not perfect, and certainly we're open to suggestions that work, but what we're doing is not I would say, unique to Newton or outside the norm.
Okay.
I would also just add to that, that this is the same process that the Newton City Council's Land Use Committee has followed for at least 8 years since I've been here. So it's pretty standard.
And I noticed that I see the hand of Councillor Kelly, who's chair. Thank you. So I want to go to have Councillor Getz, you've spoken, Councillor Block, then Councillor Oliver, and Councillor Wright, and then see where we are.
I have a question. Perhaps this is for Mr. Temple. Is there, you mentioned timeframes, strict timeframes that we need to abide by. The timeframes once a public hearing is open, is there a time limit on how long that public hearing can stay open or not?
For comprehensive permits, yes, it's 6 months. For special permits, no.
So for special permits, there's no limit on how long you could keep a public hearing open.
No, as long as you're still actively considering the project and taking in new information, you can't sit on it indefinitely.
Sure. Okay. That's it for now.
Okay, Councillor Oliver, I want to get, and I have Councillor Kelly in the list too. Go ahead, Councillor.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I think first, I'll start here. I'm going to echo my applause for the efforts of the entire ZBA. All volunteer all the time. Huge round of applause, right? I think that what I want to impose, or what I'm really going to ask people to consider, is a little bit different than what I'm hearing tonight so far. And what I want people to consider is 9 times out of 10, a builder, developer, in the case of a comprehensive permit, shows up in Newton, builds a building or some buildings, and then they go away. The people who are left are residents, pay our taxes, vote or don't vote for us. They have to live with whatever project is there. Many of these residents are expressing, I think a mild way to say it is some frustration over perhaps what's being built. And there's a difference between listening to comments and truly, as I think I've heard us all say, and hearing the comments, which I believe we do, whether they're in written form or they're presented to us live. But I'm going to ask us to think long and hard about what we can do to stay within guidelines, to maintain what I'm going to call just broadly progress of a comprehensive permit. For example, it does not make sense to not allow or not to, yield the floor for a bunch of time to said developer. It's their project. They're the ones who should be able to answer all, hopefully, of the questions being asked if the city cannot. But I think what's really important for us to consider are maybe there are nights where residents get to talk first. Not every night. All I'm suggesting is we continue to look for ways to work with the public in different ways. That's not to say that, I firmly believe that some of the frustration that we hear is because the projects aren't changing in ways that some members of the public want them to. But that's not what I'm trying to change here. We need to listen, hear, perhaps act a little bit differently, put things in a different order. I don't know what the right solutions are. I really don't. But I know that there are quite a few reasonable questions, concerns, and requests out there that I think are worth our consideration collectively. And with that said, maybe there's a way we can start to kind of chip away at some of this. And maybe it's not just, and I don't mean to pick on ZBA here, because we're not just talking ZBA. There are a lot of large projects in this city, right? DCOD and some others kind of leap to mind. Those are large projects in my mind. Right? There are a lot of ways we can help bring residents a little bit closer, bring them into the conversation in different ways. Not necessarily saying the outcomes are going to change because of that. But one thing I know we need to do is to continue to adapt and work with the public in ways that perhaps we're not doing today. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Counselor Wright and then Counselor Kelly. There's some hands raised that I just have to advise members of the public who are watching. This is a conversation among counselors and the staff. It is not a public hearing in the conventional sense. The irony of that, I'm sorry to say, is maybe not clear, but that's what it is. So Counselor Wright?
My hand wasn't up, but I'll speak anyways, to follow up with Counselor
had you on my
Oliver. I agree. If there's and there's been a lot of frustration that I've heard, with the developer speaking for an hour and then the questions and that, if occasionally that the public could speak first instead, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Now we have the Chair of Land Use who has the duty to administer our process for the council. I want to recognize Counselor Kelly. Thank you so much for coming. This is partially your item.
Thank you. Excuse me, cough, cough. Thank you, Chair Baker. I did want to sign on to this item just because it really affects the Land Use Committee by the time something comes to us. And what I'm hearing, and I wasn't exactly sure what the motivation for ZAP to docket this item, if you had thoughts about doing things differently in terms of community engagement, but listening to everybody so far, I've been thinking about, this seems to be generated partly from all of us hearing from residents, constituents who don't feel heard. Maybe 3 minutes isn't enough time to feel heard, though as other people have pointed out, excuse me, I just got like a pollen cough. We're always open to receiving emails and communications, and the 3 minutes at a public hearing is not the only chance the public has to make comments or hear. Part of why that's limited, at least I'll say from a land use committee point of view, is sometimes particularly on the bigger projects, part of why we meet in the chamber is we sometimes have 50 or 100 people there. And so there does need to be a time limit. And as Attorney Temple pointed out, we are acting in a quasi judicial role and need to follow statutory regulations about how we go about process. But I was going through in my head, and almost every ward I can think of over the last, I don't know, decade or so, Ward 1, Riverdale, Ward 2, Austin Street, Riverside, oh no, Riverdale, no, that was 1, Trio, Ward 3, Dunstan East and the Armory, Ward 4, Riverside, Ward 5, Northland. A lot of these projects, there have been so many community neighborhood meetings. And I think that's where, to Councillor Farrell's point, where we can actually have conversation and discussion and not like a 3-minute soundbite. It is all of we councillors host those meetings or get those meetings together in response to hearing from neighbors and constituents. And that's where a lot of conversation and back and forth really can happen. I think just speaking for a public hearing in land use, for instance, the reason a developer often goes first is they need to, I think, they need to explain the project to set the stage for the comments. And that's often why they don't go first. They don't go first all the time. They don't spend 30 minutes compared to somebody else's 3 throughout the process. But at least initially, I think it's important that we hear from them and planning to, again, give the background and the foundation for what it is we're talking about. Again, we're always happy to hear from residents, even after the public hearing is closed. And to a question that was asked about how long does a public hearing stay open, Attorney Temple can probably clarify this, but for a special permit, it's not necessarily open-ended because these petitions have a time frame. Part of why we schedule them to come before us is they will expire within a certain amount of time, and we need to get to them in a timely manner. And that's also why there's a certain period of time for public input. Maybe that's not true of a comprehensive permit or a 40B. And while I'm on that subject, I want to say thank you to the ZBA, because that group gets a lot of the most difficult projects where developers have decided not to come before us for a special permit, but to go to the ZBA for a 40B instead. And so they've got a lot of larger and contentious projects before them. And thank you guys for doing that and taking some of that off our plates, which is a choice of a developer. But anyway, in terms of discussion and back and forth, I think the community meetings are really key. They help shape a project. That back and forth, not a 3-minute soundbite, is really important on how changes happen to a proposal. Many different ways for residents to speak up, but if ZAP has thoughts about how to increase the participation of the public so that there's not this feeling of not being heard, I think this is a great docket item that you've put on here. And I would love to hear from some of you who docketed it, what things you have in mind specifically. Thanks for letting me be a part of it too, by the way.
Thank you. I don't want to limit discussion. I just point out that this is an opportunity that is, we will be able to continue this item if there's interest in it, to follow up on the suggestion of the Chair of Land Use. And there's something else happening this evening that several people would like to attend. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a specific point here. I understand the mechanics of a ZBA meeting, hearing. I am suggesting that perhaps there is a step prior to that with our planning department, which represents the residents of the city, that they might have an opportunity to bring in the developer and a limited and specific group representing residents to have the type of conversation we're hoping for, where a question can be asked, responded to, and a response, and a back and forth, a regular conversation. This doesn't have to happen in the ZBA hearing itself. What we would like to see, however, is that transcript gets fully presented to the ZBA, pros and cons of a conversation. And maybe then the planning department makes a decision, but the ZBA gets to see the questions that were asked and what the developer's responses are. There were, to use this very specific situation in 528 Boylston Street, there were a series of questions that were presented to the staff and to the ZBA over the period of a year. And the community sense is that those questions were never asked and answered publicly. And whether that conversation happened within the planning department and in its conversations with the applicant is something that the community never heard the answers to. And even when they brought forward a reputable expert who wanted to have conversations with the other reputable experts, it didn't have to be in the ZBA hearing itself. Although ZBA members, if they can, could probably be invited to listen to this. But that conversation, that opportunity to have a real conversation where even the staff gets to listen to experts go back and forth a bit about a specific issue. That kind of opportunity, in the opinion of a significant number of residents of this city, didn't happen. And there are some of us who believe that that is the role of the planning department, which works for the city, not the developers, in my opinion. So I just want to make that distinction. We're not asking the ZBA to open up to 45-minute rants by anybody. We're asking for another step in the process. The ZBA should have access to, and certainly the conversation, but can hear where two experts can have a conversation about an issue and help them make a better decision. That's a piece of what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest that we entertain a motion to hold this item because I think the questions have been raised. I think I want to be clear myself that I'm very grateful to the department and Mr. Rossi and the law department for advising us and all the work they've done and continue to do. I will just say that in my experience over the years, and there have been times when I've seen the planning department act as a convener in a certain conversation, which turned out to be quite successful in my ward, but that was a long time ago and far away. But I do want to say I appreciate the questions, and I think the question of the chair of land use is a significant one, that this is not something that can be resolved, but may be worth some offline conversation to see whether, if anything, is available as an idea that comes out that will add to the value of our process. So unless anyone wishes to be heard any further, I would entertain a motion to hold on this item. Councilor Getz moves hold. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? The ayes have it. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Temple, Mr. Rossi, Ms. Kara, Ms. Norton, and we are adjourned at 9:05. Thank you all.